Alice laughed. "There's no use trying," she said. "One can't believe impossible things." "I dare say you haven't had much practice," said the Queen. "When I was younger, I always did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." Growing up reading Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, I'm not sure I ever thought that I'd be taking advice from the Red Queen. But this passage has become very important to me, and I'll tell you why. Every single one of us is capable of not only believing, but of achieving the impossible. Everything that's ever been accomplished, created, or understood for the very first time was impossible before it happened. The biggest things holding you back from achieving the impossible are your fear of failing and your belief that it's impossible. Now, it's not always easy believing the impossible. As we all know, it takes practice to get really good at something. And that's why I think the Red Queen is giving us some really good advice when she tells us to believe impossible things for half an hour a day. Your practice may look different, but the first step in overcoming your fear and achieving impossible things is to start believing in them. So why are we afraid of failure? We all know that in most cases, failure isn't going to kill us. And yet, it's one of the most debilitating fears that many people face. The idea of failing sends us into a spiral of doubt, shame, and negative thinking. Physiologically, this fear can have all kinds of negative consequences. Unnecessary stress, headaches, fatigue, lower productivity, and an intense sense of dissatisfaction. And it can paralyze us. And what is it that we're really scared of? We're scared of being embarrassed, of letting people down, and we're scared that failing will prove that we don't have what it takes. But why do we think that? Why does failure have to be an ending? Why can't it be a beginning, a stepping stone? A very good friend of mine is a professional dancer, and she recently said something that really resonated with me. She said, "If you fall, make it part of the dance." That's it. Make it part of the dance. And then you keep going. Keep trying to do the impossible. The greatest success stories, the greatest innovators failed 1,000,000 times before they got it right. But they tried, and they kept trying. Those that fail succeed 100% more often than those who never try at all. You're going to fail spectacularly sometimes, but you're also going to succeed sometimes. And when you do fail, you learn what doesn't work. And you don't have to waste time trying that thing again, which is kind of great. Look, you made progress. The more failures that you have in your arsenal, the better your odds are of getting it right next time. So go and fail. Fail gloriously, magnificently, fail in bigger ways than you ever imagined possible, and then get up and keep dancing. You've seen the list before. Famous people who achieved great things later in life. It's meant to convince us that we can too. But more often than not, we say, "That's not me. They're different. They're special." And they are special. But what makes them special is something that every single one of us is capable of. That special thing that all of those great people have in common is simply the ability to fail and the refusal to give up just because something is impossible. In 2013, I was diagnosed with invasive ductal carcinoma, a type of breast cancer. With no family history and at only 30 years old, it was a complete shock and certainly not part of my plan. A few years earlier, I had decided that I wanted to consciously dedicate my life to nonprofits. I had always been involved in community and volunteer work, and I had spent most of my 20s working for a nonprofit, but I wanted to do it on purpose. So I made the decision to go back to school, and I was a full-time student, finally nearing my goal when I heard those words, "You have cancer." And as much as it frustrated me, I had to slow down. I had to reprioritize. But I was determined that I wasn't going to let it stop me. And the thing is, I wasn't special. I was stubborn. And in many ways, I was lucky. I think that it's important to note that not all of us start from the same place. Many people, for many reasons ranging from race, gender, sexuality, socioeconomic status, and mental and physical health, face significant barriers. And that's an important factor that I think needs to be acknowledged in any discussion of success. I'm going to leave that presentation to the individuals who have lived those experiences, and I hope that you all will join me in listening to their voices as part of a larger discussion. In the meantime, my point is that with all of the enormous external barriers that exist for so many, you don't have to let yourself be one of them. The barriers that we have the most control over are the ones that we place on ourselves. You are the only person that can define your own dreams. I was angry about my cancer diagnosis. I didn't know what was going to happen, and it seemed so unfair. But in the end, it changed my entire perspective, and instead of giving up, I adjusted course. And I was still pretty mad about it for a while. But in the end, I did finish my degree a few months after completing active treatment, and eventually took my first position as executive director of a nonprofit. 6 years ahead of the schedule I had set for myself. And I was pretty sure that I had no idea what I was doing. In my first month on the job, we lost 20% of our annual funding from longtime funders. And it wasn't because of anything that I did. They simply happened to change their funding priorities that year. But I was a first-time ED, and everything was on my shoulders, and it felt like it was my fault. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I spent quite a few evenings crying under my desk. But ultimately, I trudged onward. I found new funders, and I managed to bring in the financial support that we needed to keep going. And that was one of the first times that I really felt like I had achieved the impossible. And the thing is, it was never impossible. It was just big and scary, and I thought I couldn't do it. But once I had done it, I was prepared to meet the next big, scary thing head on. I stopped telling myself, you can't. That's not entirely true. It took a lot of practice to get there, and it takes practice to maintain. So there were a lot of moments of saying, I can't do this. This is impossible. But instead of saying, so I'm not even going to try, I started saying, well, you've done the impossible before. And to this day, that is what I tell myself every time I'm faced with a challenge that seems too big. In the 4 years that I spent in that position, I learned to do a lot of impossible things. We were a small operation, literally a staff of me. And it seemed like every single day I was doing something I didn't know how to do. But it was just me, and I had to. There was no one else. So I read and I researched and I asked my network for help. And ultimately, I learned so many things that I would never have tried if I had thought they were impossible. So many valuable things. Things that have made so many of the things I've done since possible. When I was in recovery, I also decided to do something on a personal level that I had thought was impossible, or at least too hard, for a very long time. I taught myself to play guitar in my 30s. I had spent years saying, it's too late, I'm too old to learn something new. At 30. How ridiculous is that? But I thought that to learn an instrument, you had to start when you were 8 or 12 or 16. But 30? That seemed like utter madness. I did it anyway. And I was bad. I was really bad. But I didn't care anymore because this was mine. I had this time that wasn't a given. And I had realized that there was something scarier than failure, not living fully. There is a quote commonly misattributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, which says that you should do one thing that scares you every day. So this quote actually comes from an essay by Mary Schmick. But what Eleanor Roosevelt actually said was quite similar. You must do the thing you think you cannot do. And both quotes are excellent advice. Scary doesn't mean impossible. Impossible doesn't even mean impossible. the point is, it's okay to be afraid. Do it anyway. Don't let the fear of failing dictate what is possible. After only a few months with my new guitar, I decided to go out and start playing in front of people, live and on stage. And it was horrifying, but also exhilarating. And so I kept doing it even when I was scared. And I kept getting better. And people liked me. I'm not a prodigy. I'm not an expert, but I take action. I do the things that scare me. Why do you think I'm here today? So I want to wrap up by telling you a few tricks that I've learned when it comes to overcoming your fear of failure and embracing the power of the impossible. First, reframe the conversation that you're having with yourself. Why are you telling yourself that you can't do something? Is it because you've never done it before and therefore you can't? Is it because it's not in your skill set? Is it because it's not easy? A fixed potential mindset makes you believe that you can only accomplish things that come naturally, things that you already know you're good at. But guess what? You probably weren't always good at those things. You just don't remember a time when you weren't. Maintaining a fixed potential mindset is limiting, only allowing you to accomplish what you know to be possible. And we're here today to talk about embracing the impossible. And that requires a new mindset, a growth potential mindset. The difference is that with a growth potential mindset, you embrace the idea that you can learn and grow to achieve more, that you aren't limited by what you already know, by some innate talent, by what you're already good at. It may be easier to stick with that fixed potential model, but if you want to achieve great things, you have to be willing to get a little uncomfortable. So stop saying I can't and start saying I haven't yet. Second, stop comparing yourself with others. Other people's experiences are different from yours. You didn't start from the same place. You didn't have the same experiences or learn the same skills. So why should your trajectory look the same? It doesn't mean you can't get there. It just means that the road is different. If you start in Los Angeles and I start in New York, can we not both get to Chicago? Do we both even need to get to Chicago? Maybe I actually need to get to Boston. So why would I compare my travel time to yours? Your path is your own. And I know that it's easier said than done to stop comparing yourself to others when you've been doing just that for your entire life. So, baby steps. If you absolutely must compare yourself to others, try comparing your failures instead. It's much easier to see someone else's success than it is to see your own. But how often are you looking at the ways in which they failed? I can guarantee you that the person you most admire does not have a perfect track record. And if they failed before succeeding, so can you. Third, failure is not a four-letter word. Stop telling yourself that it's a bad thing. Instead, go back to that growth potential mindset and ask yourself a few questions. What did I learn from this failure? How does that make me more prepared? What can I avoid next time? How does that knowledge save me from additional effort? How does this move me forward on my path? And fourth, step back to move forward. When you really hit a wall and you feel like you just can't break through it, step back. If you're learning to play an instrument and you've been practicing that one chord change for hours, days, weeks, and it just isn't working, stop. Go do something else. Literally anything else. Taking a break once in a while is okay. Go do something you're really good at and build your confidence again. Or go hang out with your friends and do something that's not productive at all. You aren't here just to achieve. 99% of the time, if you break away from the cycle of frustration, you're going to come back with a new perspective, maybe a whole new approach. And you don't know what's going to inspire that until you start trying things. Maybe that confidence boost is all you need to get the strength to make the final push that topples the wall. Maybe your friend says something over coffee that makes it all click. You don't know because you've been standing here trying to push down this wall the whole time. And you know what? Sometimes you step back and you never return. And that's okay too. Maybe your true passion, your true mission lies elsewhere. But you've been stubbornly pushing on this one wall and you've gotten tunnel vision. Maybe what you need is a different approach, and maybe what you need is a different wall. Fifth, do something rather than nothing. No one accomplished great things by standing still. You don't even have to be working towards a goal to keep going. Just do something. Some of the best advice that I've ever seen for writers is just to write every day. It doesn't matter if it's terrible, at least you're writing. Paralysis begets more paralysis. Action inspires. Kurt Vonnegut said, practicing an art, no matter how well or badly, is a way to make your soul grow. You will get an enormous reward. You will have created something. And that applies to more than just the arts. Doing is its own reward. Movement gets you unstuck. Staring at the wall and wallowing, not so much. And that's not to say that you shouldn't allow yourself a moment to feel frustration. But always remember to get back up and keep dancing. And finally, listen to the Red Queen and practice, practice, practice. And I don't just mean practice the skill that you're trying to master, the thing that you're trying to accomplish. That's great too. But before you can work towards achieving the impossible, you have to believe in it. So practice that. Tomorrow morning, wake up and spend a few minutes, whatever you've got to spare, believing something impossible. See how many impossible things you can believe before breakfast.